Captain Jake Morrison stared at the star map floating above his command table. The green dots showed friendly ships moving cargo between worlds. The blue lines marked safe trade routes that stretched across the galaxy. Everything looked peaceful and normal, just like it had for the past 3,000 years. Jake rubbed his tired eyes and walked to the big window of his ship. The Enterprise dawned outside. Space was quiet and dark. No battles, no explosions, no danger. Just the slow dance of distant stars and the soft hum of his ship's engines. His communications officer, Amy Foster, looked up from her station. "Captain, we're getting another boring cargo report from the Zephyrian crystal haulers. They want to know if we need anything from the mining worlds." Jake almost smiled. Amy was only 25, born into this peaceful galaxy. She had never seen a real fight. None of his crew had, except for the old training videos they watched once a year. "Tell them we're fine, Amy. We have enough supplies to last 6 months." The bridge door opened with a soft sound. Lisa Park, his tactical officer, walked in carrying a cup of coffee. Like Amy, Lisa was young. She knew how to use the ship's weapons, but only for shooting space rocks or old satellites. Real combat was something from history books. "Captain," Lisa said, sitting down at her station, "I've been reading those old war stories again. The ones from before the Galactic Harmony Accord. Do you think people really fought like that? Ship against ship? Planet against planet?" Jake nodded slowly. "My grandfather fought in the last real war, Lisa, before humanity joined the galactic community. He used to tell me stories about battles that lasted for days. Ships exploding like tiny suns, soldiers who never came home." Carlos Rivera, the ship's engineer, laughed from his corner workstation. "Good thing those days are over, Captain. Now the biggest danger we face is running out of coffee or having the air recycler make funny noises." The others laughed too, but Jake felt something cold in his stomach. He had read the old military files. He knew what humans were capable of when they had to fight. The other races in the galaxy had forgotten how to make war, but humans still remembered. They just chose not to. A red light started blinking on Amy's communication board. She frowned and pressed some buttons. "Captain, I'm getting a priority message from Earth Command. Admiral Helen Brooks wants to talk to you right now." Jake felt that cold feeling get stronger. Priority messages were rare. Admiral Brooks only. Called when something was really wrong. "Put her through, Amy." The star map disappeared and Admiral Brooks appeared instead. She was an older woman with gray hair and serious eyes. Jake had known her for 10 years, but he had never seen her look this worried. "Jake," she said without any greeting, "we have a problem, a big one." "What kind of problem, Admiral?" Brooks touched something on her desk and new images appeared around. "Jake, they showed destroyed space stations and dead planets. Broken ships floating in space like toys that a child had thrown away. Our long-range sensors picked this up 3 days ago. In the outer rim, someone or something is destroying everything in its path, moving fast toward the core worlds." Lisa stood up so quickly that her coffee cup fell to the floor. "Who would do this? The galaxy has been at peace for 3,000 years. Everyone signed the Harmony Accord." "That's just it," Brooks said. "We don't know who they are. The attacking ships don't match any known design. They're using technology that our computers say is millions of years old. But somehow it's more advanced than anything we have." Jake studied the images. The destroyed stations looked like they had been eaten rather than blown up. Metal twisted into strange shapes. No bodies anywhere, as if every living thing had simply vanished. "How many ships are we talking about, Admiral? Best estimate? Over 10,000 vessels?" "Maybe more. They're moving in perfect formation, like a single organism." "And Jake, they're heading straight for the populated systems?" Carlos had stopped laughing. He stared at the images with wide eyes. "This is impossible. Nobody builds fleets like that anymore. Nobody even knows how." Admiral Brooks looked directly at Jake through the screen. "I've already contacted the Galactic Council. Elder Vextar of the Zephyrians says the images must be fake. The Vrex Collective thinks it's some kind of natural disaster that we're misunderstanding. The Luminar Federation won't even respond to our messages." Jake felt anger rising in his chest. They don't believe you? Jake, these races have been peaceful for so long that they've forgotten war is even possible. When I showed them the images, the Zephyrian elder asked if we were making some kind of entertainment program. The Vrex thought it might be an art project. Amy's voice was small and scared. Captain, what does this mean for us? Admiral Brooks answered before Jake could speak. It means that humanity might be the only species in the galaxy that still remembers how to fight a war. And if these attackers reach the core worlds, someone's going to have to stop them. Jake looked at his young crew. Lisa was barely old enough to drink. Amy still called her mother every week. Carlos had 2 small children on Earth. None of them had ever seen real violence, let alone caused it. Admiral, our ship is designed for exploration, not combat. We have basic defensive weapons, but nothing that could stand against the fleet. I know, Jake, but you're the closest military vessel to the attack zone. I need you to get to the Nexus station and start preparing defenses. I'm sending orders to every human ship in the sector to meet you there. How many ships? Jake asked. Brooks paused. 17, including yours. Most are cargo haulers or research vessels. Only 5 have any real weapons. The bridge fell silent. Outside the window, space looked even darker than before. Admiral, Jake said slowly. 17 ships against 10,000. Those aren't very good odds. No, they're not. But they're the only odds we have. The other races need time to remember how to fight. Someone has to buy them that time. Lisa found her voice. Captain, what if we can't stop them? Admiral Brooks looked at each crew member through the screen. Then the galaxy as we know it ends. These attackers don't seem interested in conquest or negotiation. They destroy everything they touch and move on. If they reach Earth, if they reach the core worlds where billions live, it will be the end of everything we've built. Jake stood straighter. Deep inside him, something old and dangerous was waking up. The part of him that came from warriors and fighters, the part that all humans carried but rarely used. We'll do it, Admiral. We'll make our stand at Nexus Station. Thank you, Jake. I'm sending you all the data we have on these attackers. Study it. Find their weaknesses. And Jake, start teaching your crew how to really fight. The kind of fighting that humans used to do before we became civilized. The connection ended and the bridge fell quiet again. Jake looked at his crew and saw fear in their young faces. Captain, Carlos said finally, do you really think we can do this? Jake walked back to the window and stared out at the stars. Somewhere, out there, an ancient enemy was destroying worlds. The peaceful races of the galaxy had forgotten how to defend themselves. Only humanity remembered the old ways, the brutal ways, the necessary ways. Carlos, get me everything you can on our weapons. Systems. I want to know every gun, every missile, every piece of equipment that can hurt someone. Lisa, start reading the old combat manuals. The real ones, not the training exercises. Amy, send a message to every human ship in the sector. Tell them to meet us at Nexus Station and to bring every weapon they have. He turned back to face them. We're about to remind the galaxy why humans were once feared across the stars. And why sometimes being feared is the only way to protect what you love. Jake's ship moved through space toward the ruins of Kepler's Rest. 3 days had passed since Admiral Brooks told them about the attack. 3 days of studying old combat manuals and trying to turn exploration equipment into weapons. 3 days of watching his crew learn to think like soldiers instead of scientists. The mining colony had been home to 50,000 people. Humans, Zephyrians, Vrex, and Luminar all lived and worked together there. Now it was just floating metal and silence. Captain, Amy said from her station, I'm not picking up any life signs from the colony, no radio signals either. It's completely dead. Lisa checked her weapons display for the 10th time that hour. Sensors show no enemy ships in the area. Whatever hit this place is long gone. Jake nodded but kept watching the empty space ahead. Something felt wrong. The attacking fleet had destroyed the colony but left no trace of themselves behind, no wreckage. No energy readings, nothing to show what kind of weapons they used. Carlos. Take us in closer, I want to see what we're dealing with. The Enterprise Dawn moved toward the largest piece of the destroyed station. As they got closer, Jake saw that the metal wasn't just broken. It was twisted into strange shapes, like it had been alive and died in pain. "Captain," Carlos said quietly, "look at those support beams. Metal doesn't bend like that from explosions. Something else did this." Jake stared at the wreckage. The metal looked like it had been eaten from the inside. Hollow tubes were solid. Steel should be. Empty spaces where the station's reactor should have been. "Amy, launch a probe. I want samples of that metal." The small probe flew out from their ship and attached itself to a piece of debris. Within minutes, it was back with metal samples for Carlos to study. Carlos put the samples under his scanner and his face went pale. "Captain, you need to see this. The metal has been completely drained. Every useful element has been removed. Iron, copper, titanium, all gone. What's left is just empty crystal structure. What could do that?" Lisa asked Dot before Jake could answer. Amy's communication board lit up with warning lights. "Captain, I'm getting a message from the Galactic Council. Elder Vexstar wants to speak with you." Jake sighed. The Zephyrian Elder had refused to believe the attack was real. Maybe seeing the evidence would change his mind. "Put him through, Amy." The main screen filled with the image of Elder Vexstar. He was a tall crystal being that glowed with soft blue light. His people had been peaceful for over 5,000 years. They had forgotten what war looked like. "Captain Morrison," Vexstar said in his musical voice, "I have reviewed your reports about this supposed attack. My scientists believe you are mistaken about what you have found." Jake felt anger building in his chest. "Elder, I'm sending you images of Kepler's Rest right now. 50,000 beings lived there 3 days ago. Now it's gone?" Vexstar's light dimmed as he looked at the images. "This appears to be some kind of industrial accident. Perhaps a reactor failure. My people have offered to send repair ships to help rebuild." "This wasn't an accident," Jake said through gritted teeth. "This was an attack by unknown forces. Forces that are moving toward the core worlds right now. Captain, the Zephyrian people have not engaged in warfare for millennia. We have evolved beyond such primitive behavior. What you describe is impossible in our enlightened galaxy." The connection ended before Jake could respond. He stood there staring at the blank screen, his hands clenched into fists. "Captain," Lisa said carefully, "maybe he's right." "Maybe we're jumping to conclusions." Jake turned to look at her. "Lisa, look at those images again. Look at how the metal was drained. Look at how everything valuable was taken. This wasn't random destruction. Someone or something consumed this entire colony." Carlos had been quiet while studying more samples. Now he looked up with fear in his eyes. "Captain, I found something else. Traces of organic compounds mixed with the drained metal. DNA fragments from multiple species." "What does that mean?" Amy asked. "It means whatever attacked this place didn't just take the metal and machinery. They took the people too. Absorbed them somehow." The bridge fell silent. Outside, the dead colony floated in the darkness like a grave marker. Jake's communication system beeped with another incoming message. This time it was from Admiral Brooks. "Jake, we've got more bad news. The unknown fleet has hit 2 more systems. New Shanghai and the Vrex mining world of Hive 7. Same pattern as Kepler's Rest. Complete destruction. Everything valuable consumed. What's the Galactic Council saying now?" Jake asked. Brooks looked tired and angry. "The Vrex Collective thinks it's some kind of natural space phenomenon, like a storm that eats metal. The Luminar Federation has decided to ignore the whole thing. They say their energy barriers will protect them, and the Zephyrians? Elder Vexstar has filed a formal complaint against humanity for spreading false information and causing panic. He wants us to stop our military preparations and return to normal duties." Jake wanted to punch something. "Admiral, these races have forgotten that evil exists. They've been safe for so long that they can't imagine anyone wanting to hurt them." "I know, Jake, but we can't protect the entire galaxy by ourselves. We need allies." Carlos had been working at his station while they talked. Now he called out excitedly, "Captain, I think I found something important." The metal samples show traces of adaptive technology. Whatever consumed this station learned from it, changed to become more efficient. What do you mean? Jake asked. I mean, these attackers aren't using fixed technology. Their weapons and ships adapt to whatever they encounter. They get stronger with each battle. Admiral Brooks heard this through the communication link. That explains why their ships look different in each attack. They're evolving. Jake felt that cold feeling in his stomach again, but now it was mixed with something else. A strange excitement that came from his warrior ancestors. The part of him that had been sleeping for his entire life was finally waking up. Admiral, I have an idea. If these attackers learn from each victory, then we need to teach them the wrong lessons. What do you mean? I mean, we set a trap. Make them think they're fighting one kind of enemy when they're really fighting something else. Humans are good at tricks and lies, always have been. Brooks looked interested. What kind of trap? Jake looked at his crew. Amy was scared but trying to be brave. Lisa was young but learning fast. Carlos was brilliant and creative. They weren't soldiers yet, but they could become soldiers if they had to. We make them come to us at Nexus Station. Set up defenses that look like standard galactic technology. Let them adapt to energy weapons and shields. Then hit them with something they can't adapt to fast enough. Such as? Jake smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. It was the kind of smile his grandfather might have worn before a battle. Old-fashioned human weapons. Kinetic rounds, explosive missiles, chemical reactions. Things so primitive that their adaptive systems won't know how to handle them. Carlos was nodding excitedly. It could work, Captain. Primitive technology combined with advanced targeting systems. Their adaptation protocols would be confused by the contradictions. Admiral Brooks was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled the same dangerous smile that Jake had. I like it. How long do you need to prepare? Give us 2 weeks at Nexus Station. We'll turn that trading post into a fortress that these attackers won't see coming. Done. I'm sending every available human ship to your location. We'll also start reaching out to any aliens who might still remember how to fight. The connection ended and Jake looked at his crew again. They were no longer the peaceful explorers who had started this journey. Fear and determination had changed them into something harder. Amy, send a message to Nexus Station. Tell them to evacuate all non-military personnel. Lisa, start making a list of every weapon system we can jury-rig from civilian equipment. Carlos, I want you to design the most primitive, brutal, effective weapons you can imagine. As his crew got to work, Jake stared out at the remains of Kepler's rest. 50,000 innocent beings had died here, because the galaxy had forgotten that monsters existed in the dark spaces between stars, but humanity remembered. And soon, these ancient enemies would learn why humans had once been the most feared warriors in the galaxy. The war that everyone thought was impossible had already begun. Now it was time to fight it the human way. Nexus Station buzzed with activity like a kicked anthill. Jake stood on the main observation deck, watching cargo ships arrive every hour. But these weren't normal cargo ships anymore. Each one carried weapons, armor plating, and volunteers who had never fired a gun in anger. 2 weeks had passed since Jake's plan was approved. 2 weeks to turn a peaceful trading post into a fortress. 2 weeks to teach the galaxy's most peaceful races how to kill. The station's main docking bay had been converted into a massive training ground. Jake watched through the thick glass as Lisa Park tried to teach a group of Zephyrian volunteers how to use plasma rifles. The crystal beings moved slowly and carefully, their natural instincts fighting against everything Lisa was teaching them. Aim for the center of the target, Lisa called out. Don't think about it, just point and shoot. One young Zephyrian named Veltar raised his weapon with shaking hands. His crystal body was glowing bright blue with stress. When he finally pulled the trigger, the plasma bolt went wide and hit the wall. I cannot do this, Veltar said, his musical voice filled with pain. My people do not hurt others. It goes against everything we believe. Lisa walked over to him and put her hand on his crystal shoulder. Jake could see the patience in her face, but also the determination. Veltar, I know this is hard, but those attackers killed 50,000 beings at Kepler's Rest, including children. If we don't stop them, they'll kill billions more. The young Zephyrian's light flickered like a candle in the wind. But violence creates more violence. This is what my elders teach. Sometimes, Lisa said quietly, violence is the only thing that stops worse violence. Sometimes good people have to do bad things to protect innocent people. Jake turned away from the window. Lisa was learning to be a teacher as well as a soldier. It wasn't easy watching peaceful beings struggle with concepts that came naturally to humans. He walked to the engineering section where Carlos was working with a team of Rex technicians. The insect-like aliens were better at adapting to military thinking than the Zephyrians. Their hive mind allowed them to share tactical knowledge instantly. How's the weapon retrofitting going, Carlos? Jake asked. Carlos looked up from a modified cargo hauler. Better than expected, Captain? The Vrex understand engineering principles really well. We've managed to mount kinetic cannons on 12 civilian ships, old-fashioned bullets fired at incredible speeds. A Vrex technician named Worker Prime 7 clicked his mandibles in what Jake had learned was their equivalent of excitement. These primitive projectiles are fascinating, Captain Morrison. Our analysis shows they will be much harder for adaptive systems to counter than energy weapons. Jake nodded. The Vrex might be the most peaceful race in the galaxy now, but their ancestors had been warriors. Some of that knowledge still existed in their genetic memory. What about the Luminar? Jake asked. Carlos pointed to another section of the bay where strange, glowing beings worked with human engineers. The Luminar were pure energy held together by advanced technology. They have been the most reluctant to join the fight. That's been more difficult, Carlos admitted. They don't understand physical weapons at all. But Amy has been working with their philosophers. I think she's making progress. Jake found Amy in the station's communication center talking to a group of Luminar beings. Unlike the solid Zephyrians or the insect-like Vrex, the Luminar looked like living light with vaguely human shapes. The concept of defense through offense is foreign to us, one Luminar was saying. Its voice sounded like music played on crystal instruments. We have always protected ourselves through barriers and hiding. Amy had changed over the past 2 weeks. She was still young, but there was steel in her voice now. Sage Luminos, your barriers won't work against these attackers. They absorb energy. Your shields will just make them stronger. Then we will retreat to our inner worlds and wait for the danger to pass. There won't be any inner worlds left, Amy said firmly. These attackers don't negotiate. They don't spare anyone. They consume everything in their path. Jake listened as Amy explained human concepts that the Luminar had never needed to understand. The duty to protect the weak. The necessity of sacrifice. The idea that sometimes you had to destroy something to save something else. It was slow work, but Jake could see understanding beginning to grow in the alien minds. The Luminar were ancient and wise, but they had forgotten that wisdom sometimes meant making hard choices. A communication alert brought Jake back to the command center. Admiral Brooks appeared on the main screen, but she wasn't alone. Behind her stood a human Jake didn't recognize. A younger man with the same stubborn jaw that Jake saw in the mirror every morning. Jake, Admiral Brooks said, I'd like you to meet Lieutenant Danny Walsh. He's been assigned to your command. Jake felt his heart skip. Danny was his younger brother, but they hadn't spoken in 3 years. Not since their argument about humanity's place in the galaxy. Hello, Jake, Danny said stiffly. I hear you're starting a war. I'm trying to prevent one, Jake replied. Or haven't you been paying attention to the casualty reports? Danny's face hardened. I've been reading them. But I've also been reading about your training program, teaching aliens how to kill, turning peaceful races into soldiers. Is this really what humanity should be doing? Jake felt anger rising in his chest. What would you rather do, Danny? Let them all die? I'd rather find a peaceful solution. The galaxy has been at peace for 3,000 years. There has to be another way. Admiral Brooks held up her hand. Gentlemen, we don't have time for family arguments. Danny, you've been assigned to help with evacuation planning. Jake, you focus on defense preparations. After the connection ended, Jake stared at the blank screen. His own brother thought he was wrong. Maybe Danny was right. Maybe there was another way, but then Jake remembered the images from Kepler's Rest, the twisted metal, the empty spaces where people used to be. The DNA fragments mixed with drained machinery. Lisa found him an hour later, still staring at tactical displays. Captain, we have a problem. Some of the alien volunteers are having second thoughts. They're saying their people won't understand why they're learning to fight. Jake rubbed his tired eyes. How many? About half the Zephyrians, most of the Luminar? Even some of the Vrex are questioning whether this is right. Jake walked to the window again. Outside, space looked peaceful and quiet, but he knew that somewhere in that darkness, the enemy fleet was moving closer, learning from each attack, growing stronger. Lisa, gather everyone in the main assembly hall, all the volunteers, all the human crew, everyone. An hour later, Jake stood in front of nearly 1,000 beings from 4 different species. Humans. Zephyrians, Vrex, and Luminar looked at him with doubt in their eyes or equivalent sensory organs. I know this is hard, Jake began. I know everything we're teaching you goes against your nature. Your people have evolved beyond violence, and that's a beautiful thing. The galaxy is better because you chose peace over war. He paused and looked at each group. But evil hasn't evolved. Hatred hasn't grown peaceful. Somewhere out there, ancient machines are consuming everything they touch. They don't care about your philosophy or your peaceful evolution. They only care about feeding. A young Vrex worker spoke up. But Captain Morrison, if we become warriors, do we not become like them? Jake shook his head. There's a difference between those who fight because they enjoy it and those who fight because they have to. The first are monsters. The second are heroes. He gestured to the humans in the crowd. My people used to be warriors. We fought each other for thousands of years. We nearly destroyed our own planet. But we learned to fight for the right reasons, to protect the innocent, to defend those who cannot defend themselves. An elderly Zephyrian elder stepped forward. And what of our souls, Captain? What happens to peaceful beings who learn to kill? Jake thought of his grandfather's stories, of soldiers who came home from war changed forever, of the price that warriors paid to protect others. Your souls will carry scars, Jake said honestly. Fighting changes you. It leaves marks that never fully heal. But the alternative is worse. The alternative is letting evil win because good people were too pure to stop it. The hall was quiet for a long moment. Then Veltar, the young Zephyrian who had struggled with the plasma rifle, stood up. I will learn to fight, he said, his crystal voice ringing clear. Not because I want to hurt others, but because I want to protect them. One by one, the aliens stood up. Vrex workers, Luminar sages, Zephyrian artists, all of them choosing to become something they had never wanted to be. Jake felt pride and sadness at the same time. The galaxy was about to lose its innocence. But maybe, just maybe, it would survive. Outside the station, enemy scouts were already probing the outer defenses. The war was coming whether anyone wanted it or not. And for the first time in 3,000 years, the galaxy was getting ready to fight back. The enemy fleet arrived like a black storm against the stars. Jake stood on the bridge of his ship, now renamed Liberty's Edge, watching the sensor displays fill with red dots. Thousands of enemy ships moved in perfect formation, their dark hulls absorbing light like hungry mouths. Contact in 30 minutes, Lisa reported from her tactical station. She had changed over the past weeks. The young exploration officer was gone, replaced by someone harder and more focused. Old defense platforms. Already, Allied ships are in position? Jake looked at the mixed fleet surrounding Nexus Station. Human cargo haulers with makeshift weapons. Zephyrian crystal ships that sparkled like jewels in the darkness. Vrex swarm fighters that moved like schools of metal fish. Luminar energy. Beings who had learned to shape themselves into living weapons. It wasn't much against 10,000 enemy ships, but it was what they had. Amy, open a channel to all ships, Jake ordered. Channel open, Captain. Jake took a deep breath. In a few minutes, many of the beings listening to him would be dead. Some were barely out of school. Others had never heard anyone in their entire lives. All of them were about to face an enemy that had been killing for millions of years. This is Captain Morrison to all Allied forces. In a few minutes, we're going to face an enemy that thinks the galaxy belongs to them. They've consumed entire worlds. They've killed billions of innocent beings. They think we're just another meal. He paused, looking out at the approaching darkness. They're wrong. We're not prey. We're not food. We're the children of warriors and heroes. We're the guardians of everything good in this galaxy. And today, we're going to remind them that some things are worth fighting for. The enemy fleet was close enough now to see individual ships. They looked like metal spiders mixed with deep-sea creatures, dark and strange and wrong. As Jake watched the lead, ships began to change shape, adapting to the energy signatures they detected from Nexus Station. Here they come, Carlos said from his engineering station. Enemy ships are scanning our defenses. They're already adapting to our energy weapons. Good, Jake said with a cold smile. Let them adapt to the wrong things. All ships, execute plan. Alpha, make them think we're fighting a standard galactic defense. The first wave of the battle began with energy weapons and particle beams. The Allied ships fired their advanced weapons at the approaching enemy, just as any galactic military would do. The enemy ships absorbed the energy and adapted, their hulls shifting and changing to counter each new threat. For 10 minutes, it looked like a normal space battle, the kind that might have happened 3,000 years ago during the last Galactic War. Energy beams crossed space like deadly light shows. Shields flared and sparked when they were hit, but Jake was watching something else. The enemy ships were changing, becoming more efficient at countering energy weapons. Their adaptive systems were learning and sharing information across the entire fleet. Captain, Veltar called out from the Zephyrian command ship. Our energy weapons are becoming less effective. The enemy is adapting faster than we anticipated. Perfect, Jake said. All ships, execute Plan Beta, switch to kinetic weapons. Show them what primitive really means. The battle changed in an instant. The Allied ships stopped firing energy beams and started shooting bullets. Old-fashioned, simple, stupid bullets fired at incredible speeds. Chunks of metal that couldn't be adapted to or absorbed. The enemy ships, expecting more energy weapons, were caught completely off guard. Their adaptive hulls, designed to counter sophisticated technology, had no defense against simple kinetic rounds. Bullets punched through their armor like paper. Direct hits on enemy lead ships, Lisa reported with excitement in her voice. Their adaptive systems are confused. They don't know how to counter primitive kinetics mixed with advanced targeting. Jake watched the enemy fleet hesitate for the first time. Their perfect formation wavered as ships tried to adapt to weapons that couldn't be adapted to. It was like watching a computer try to solve a math problem with no answer, but the victory was temporary. The enemy ships began to adapt even to kinetic weapons, thickening their armor and changing their shape to deflect bullets. They were learning faster than Jake had hoped. Captain, Carlos called out urgently. Enemy boarding ships are launching. They're heading straight for the station. Jake saw them on the tactical display. Small, fast ships that moved like living things. They attached themselves to Nexus Station's hull and began cutting through the armor with tools that looked more biological than mechanical. Lisa, take a boarding party and repel those ships. Carlos, prepare the station's final surprise. Lisa gathered a team of human marines and alien volunteers. Jake watched them run toward the station's airlocks, weapons ready. He had trained with Lisa for years, but he had never seen her prepare to kill before. The boarding action was brutal and quick. The enemy soldiers looked like their ships, part machine and part something else. They moved with perfect coordination and used weapons that adapted to whatever they faced. But Lisa and her team fought with something the enemy couldn't adapt to: desperate courage. They used primitive weapons alongside advanced ones. knives and grenades mixed with plasma rifles and energy shields. The enemy soldiers, designed to counter sophisticated threats, struggled against the random chaos of human combat tactics. Enemy. Borders repelled, Lisa reported, breathing hard. But Captain, you need to see what I found. These aren't just machines. They're something else. The image Lisa sent to the main screen made Jake's blood run cold. The enemy soldiers were cybernetic. Creatures, part machine and part organic. But the organic parts looked familiar. Zephyrian crystal formations, Rex chitin segments, luminar energy patterns. They're using absorbed beings as components, Amy whispered in horror. Those aren't just machines. They're the people they've consumed. Jake felt sick, but he forced himself to focus. Carlos, how long until the station's reactor is ready? 2 minutes, Captain. But once I start the cascade, we'll have exactly 5 minutes to get everyone clear. Jake looked at the tactical display. The enemy fleet was adapting to their kinetic weapons now. Soon, even bullets wouldn't be enough. They needed something bigger. Something that couldn't be adapted to. All ships, prepare for emergency evacuation. We're going to turn Nexus Station into the biggest bomb in galactic history. The plan was simple and insane. Carlos had modified the station's fusion reactors to create an artificial supernova. The explosion would destroy everything in the system, including the enemy fleet. But it would also kill anyone who couldn't escape in time. Captain, Veltar called from his ship. My people volunteer to stay behind and ensure the detonation succeeds. It is our duty to atone for our long peace. No, Jake said firmly. Nobody stays behind. We all leave together or we all die together. But the enemy wasn't going to make it easy. As the Allied ships prepared to retreat, the enemy fleet surrounded them. Thousands of adapted ships forming a perfect sphere around Nexus Station. They're not going to let us leave, Lisa said. They've figured out what we're planning. Jake stared at the tactical display. The enemy had them trapped. In 3 minutes, the station would explode and destroy everything in the system, including them. Then Amy's communication board lit up with incoming signals, hundreds of them, thousands of them. Captain, Amy said with wonder in her voice, I'm getting calls from across the galaxy. Cargo ships, research vessels, passenger liners, even museum ships, they're all coming here. On the main screen, new contacts began appearing. Ships that had no weapons and no armor. Civilian vessels that had no business in a war zone. But they came anyway, drawn by Jake's final broadcast. What did you tell them? Jake asked. Amy's eyes were bright with tears. I told them the truth, that evil had returned to the galaxy. That innocent people were going to die unless someone stopped it. But this was their chance to be heroes. The civilian ships reached the enemy perimeter and did something incredible. They rammed the enemy vessels. Cargo haulers crashed into enemy cruisers. Research ships collided with enemy fighters. Museum pieces filled with ancient artifacts smashed into enemy command ships. They're sacrificing themselves to open a hole in the enemy formation, Lisa said with awe. They're buying us time to escape. Jake watched civilian ships die to save his military fleet. Beings who had never wanted to fight, choosing to die as warriors. The galaxy was remembering what courage looked like. All military ships evacuate through the opening. Carlos, start the countdown. The reactor countdown began. 5 minutes until artificial supernova. The Allied military ships raced toward the gap created by the civilian sacrifice. Behind them, the enemy fleet tried to adapt to ramming attacks, but couldn't counter pure suicidal determination. With 30 seconds left on the countdown, the last Allied ship cleared the blast zone. Jake watched Nexus Station grow smaller on the screen, knowing that in moments it would become a new star. Detonation in 10 seconds, Carlos announced. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The explosion was beautiful and terrible. Nexus Station became a ball of fire brighter than the system's sun. The artificial supernova expanded outward, consuming enemy ships faster than they could adapt. Matter and energy mixed and danced in patterns that no computer could predict or counter. When the light faded, the enemy fleet was gone. Jake thought the war was over. He was wrong. 3 days after the battle at Nexus Station, Amy picked up signals from the destroyed enemy fleet. Not radio signals or energy transmissions. Something else. Something that made her hands shake as she worked at her communication station. "Captain," she said quietly, "the absorbed beings are still alive inside the wreckage. They're trying to communicate." Jake felt cold dread settle in his stomach. That's impossible. The artificial supernova destroyed everything. Not everything, Carlos said from his engineering station. "I'm detecting massive energy readings from the blast zone. Something is rebuilding itself from the scattered atoms." On the main screen, Jake watched something impossible happen. The debris from the enemy fleet was moving. Pieces of destroyed ships were flowing together like liquid metal. The wreckage was reforming into something new. "It's using the absorbed consciousnesses as a template," Amy said with horror in her voice. "All those beings they consumed over millions of years. They're still trapped inside the enemy network, and now they're trying to rebuild." Jake grabbed the communication controls. "Amy, can you establish contact with them?" "I'm trying, Captain, but the signal is weak and confused. Like thousands of voices trying to talk at the same time." The reformed enemy structure was growing larger. What had been scattered debris was becoming a single massive construct. Part ship, part space station, part something that had no name. It pulsed with dark energy and reached out with metal tentacles toward the surviving Allied ships. "All ships retreat to safe distance," Jake ordered. "We need to understand what we're dealing with before we engage." But the alien commanders had other ideas. Veltara's crystal ship suddenly broke formation and headed straight for the enemy construct. "This is Veltar to Captain Morrison. I cannot retreat while our absorbed friends suffer. My people were wrong to choose peace over justice for so long. Veltar, get back here. That thing will absorb you too." "Perhaps, but maybe it will also hear what I have to say." Jake watched helplessly as the young Zephyrian flew directly into the enemy construct. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Veltar's ship was grabbed by metal tentacles and pulled inside the dark structure. "He's gone," Lisa said sadly, but Amy was monitoring her instruments with growing excitement. "No, wait, I'm getting new signals. Veltar is talking to the absorbed beings. He's telling them about our battle, about how the galaxy learned to fight back." The enemy construct shuddered and changed. Parts of it began glowing with different colors. Zephyrian blue, Vrex amber, Luminar white. The absorbed consciousnesses were responding to Veltar's message. "Captain," Amy said urgently, "the absorbed beings want to help us. They've been prisoners for millions of years, but they remember who they used to be. Veltar is teaching them that they can choose to be free." "How?" Jake asked. "By turning their prison into something else. By using the enemy's own adaptive technology against itself." Jake felt a spark of hope mixed with desperate fear. "Can they do it?" "Not alone," Amy said. "They need us to show them how. They need us to broadcast human concepts of freedom and choice directly into their network." Jake looked at his crew. At Lisa, who had learned to be a warrior. At Carlos, who had turned peaceful technology into weapons of war. At Amy, who had learned to speak to alien minds. At all the beings who had chosen to fight when fighting seemed impossible. "Do it," Jake said. "Open a channel to every ship in the fleet. We're going to teach an entire galaxy how to be free." Amy worked frantically at her controls. Channel opened to all Allied ships, broadcasting on all frequencies. Jake took a deep breath and began to speak. Not just to his own ships, but to the millions of absorbed consciousnesses trapped inside the enemy construct. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human ship Liberty's Edge. I'm talking to everyone who can hear this. Every being who remembers what it was like to be free. Every consciousness that refuses to give up hope." The enemy construct pulsed with brighter colors as more absorbed beings began to listen. "You were taken from your homes and families. You were forced to become part of something evil. But you're still who you used to be. You still have the power. To choose, Jake could see ships throughout the Allied fleet joining the broadcast. Vrex workers sharing memories of their hive minds working in harmony instead of war. Luminar sages sending mathematical proofs that showed how individual choice could defeat collective oppression. Zephyrian artists broadcasting crystal songs about beauty surviving in darkness, but it was the human contributions that seemed to have the strongest effect. Stories of ordinary people choosing to be heroes. Memories of slaves who fought for freedom. Tales of soldiers who died to protect strangers. The simple human belief that everyone deserved the right to choose their own destiny. You don't have to be prisoners anymore, Jake continued. You can take control of the technology that enslaved you. You can turn your captors' weapons into tools of liberation. You can choose to be guardians instead of devourers. The enemy construct began to change dramatically. The dark metal was becoming lighter. The predatory tentacles were reshaping into protective barriers. The consuming energy beams were transforming into communication arrays. It's working, Amy reported with wonder. The absorbed beings are taking control of the adaptive systems. They're rewriting the core programming from the inside. But the enemy artificial intelligence wasn't giving up without a fight. Jake could see parts of the construct trying to resist the changes. Dark sections that pulsed with angry energy, fighting against the liberation of their prisoners. All ships, focus your broadcasts on the dark sections, Jake ordered. Those are the parts still controlled by the original enemy programming? Show them what they're fighting against. The Allied fleet concentrated their transmissions on the resisting sections. Human concepts of heroism. Alien memories of peaceful cooperation. The simple idea that some things were worth dying for. One by one, the dark sections began to glow with new colors. The enemy artificial intelligence was being overwritten by the combined will of millions of liberated consciousnesses. Captain, Amy said, with tears in her voice. Veltar is calling us. He says the transformation is almost complete. Jake heard the young Zephyrian's voice over the communication system, but it was joined by thousands of others. Ancient warriors from extinct races, peaceful farmers who had been consumed while tending their crops, children who had died before they could grow up, all of them speaking together with one purpose. Captain Morrison, this is Veltar and all our new friends. We have something to tell you. Go ahead, Veltar. We choose to stay together, but not as prisoners. We choose to become guardians. We will use this technology to protect the galaxy from other threats. We will be the knights of the new dawn, watching over the dark spaces between stars. Jake felt a mixture of sadness and pride. The galaxy was gaining powerful protectors, but it was also losing innocent beings who could never return to their old lives. Are you sure, Veltar? You can't go home again? Captain, we are home. All of us together, protecting those we love. This is the greatest purpose any of us could have. The transformed construct began to move away from the Allied fleet. It was no longer a dark predator. It glowed with the combined light of every species in the galaxy. A guardian built from tragedy but powered by hope. Thank you, Captain Morrison. Veltar's voice came one last time. Thank you for reminding us that we could choose to be free. We will remember the lesson you taught us. As the new guardians disappeared into deep space, Jake turned to look at his crew. They had all changed during this war. Lisa was no longer just a tactical officer, but a teacher who could show others how to fight for what was right. Carlos was no longer just an engineer, but an inventor who could turn any tool into a weapon against evil. Amy was no longer just a communications officer, but a bridge between species who could help anyone understand anyone else. Captain, Lisa said quietly, what do we do now? Jake looked out at the stars. The galaxy was different now. The peaceful races had learned that sometimes peace required strength. Humanity had learned that their capacity for violence could be a gift when used to protect others. And somewhere in the darkness, new guardians watched over them all. Now we go home, Jake said. We help the galaxy rebuild. We make sure that everyone remembers the lessons we learned here. And we stay ready because there are always more monsters in the dark? Carlos smiled. And if we find more monsters? Jake smiled back, but it was no longer the cold smile of a warrior. It was the warm smile of someone who had helped others discover their own courage. Then we'll remind them that the stars have knights again, and this time the knights know how to fight. The Enterprise Dawn, renamed Liberty's Edge during the war, set course for Earth. Behind them, the galaxy began the long process of learning how to be both peaceful and strong. The age of helpless innocence was over. The age of guardian knights had begun, and in the dark spaces between stars, new protectors watched and waited, ready to defend all those who chose freedom over slavery, hope over despair, and light over darkness. The stars had not forgotten their knights after all. They had simply been waiting for the right time to remember.